Hey there guys, welcome back for another Mortal Realms Monday painting video. This time taking a look at the Sigmarite altar, and to start us off I've gone ahead and primed this in grey primer, and then I've applied some sand using PVA and a bit of the two texture paints. I cannot remember the name of the brown one, but the black one is Mordant Earth. Now I should have applied these before doing the primer, but it doesn't matter too much. So for this model I'm going to be looking at a sandstone kind of colour, so sort of, you know, a pale yellowy brown kind of colour. And to start this off, I'm going to get a nice even coverage of Avaland Sunset. So obviously this is very slightly thinned down. You can see me just adding a little bit more water here to thin it, and I'm going to give this about 3 or 4 coats. You know, get it on nice and even, make sure that it gets in between all the sand grit and such. So I'll go on and get a few layers of this on, and then we'll come back and take a look at the next step. Okay, so for the top here, I want a chipped away effect to the blue and gold paints that are going to be painted over here. Now I haven't got any masking fluid, which would be the ideal thing here. If you don't know what masking fluid is, you can check that up online. It's just basically like a PVA that will go over an area and then rubs off quite easily. So what you would do is paint over the top of it and then rub it off. What I'm doing here is sort of a poor man's way of doing it. Basically applying some PVA in the areas where I want the yellow to remain, and then I'm going to sprinkle on a little bit of sand, just so it gives a bit of a rough texture that I can then rub away with my thumb. Because the glue is underneath it but the sand is sort of into the glue, it will pull it off. Like I say, you could use the other stuff, but if you don't have the other stuff, then this with a little bit of sand comes to the same effect. Now the only thing I will say, if you are planning on using this idea, don't do it at this stage. I got a bit excited and started it too early. You actually want to do it once you've finished all of the sandstone colour of the pyramid. It's got a few other stages to go through with dry brushing and stuff yet, but you can do it this way if you want the darker Avaland Sunset colour underneath. So I'll let this dry and then we can get on with the rest of the sandstone. Okay, so it seems I have missed a step in recording somewhere. Just before this stage, after applying the PVA and the sand to the top, I went ahead with some Agrax Earthshade and gave this a wash all over. Obviously keeping it, letting it get down into those recesses and such, but just giving it a gentle brush over on the vertical surfaces, trying not to let it you know, drip, run, pool, anything like that, but just give it an Agrax stain. Once that has dried, after about 20 to 30 minutes, I'm now going back with the Avaland Sunset and a large dry brush, and I'm just very roughly dry brushing over all of the area, or, you know, all the surfaces. Although I'm dry brushing, this does have a little bit more paint on it than I would usually use. Obviously dry brushing, you want to remove as much as possible. With this stage you can leave a little bit on there. It doesn't matter too much, you just don't want enough that you're going to get streaks. So yeah, give it a good couple of runs over with the dry brush on this, and then we can come back to the next step. Okay, so with that first layer of dry brush, I'm now mixing a 50-50 mix of Avaland Sunset and Screaming Skull, and this is to start paling down the Avaland Sunset. Essentially all I'm doing is going multiple layers of dry brushing, each time adding a little bit more of the Screaming Skull to the Avalon Sunset mix, and going back over and dry brushing that. Obviously with each successive layer I'm making sure there is minimal paint on the brush, and that I'm only picking up the hardest edges towards the end of the dry brushing stages. I hope that makes sense. So basically this will be a little bit more of a heavier dry brush, making sure that it covers the areas, picks up every every bit of detail, and by the time I'm using the lightest mix I'm just picking off the sort of the finer details, the edges and things like that. And then finally with just Screaming Skull, I go in and just pick off the very edges, the corners of each of these stones, just to give them that final bit of highlight. Now I will say that the camera here, for some reason I cannot get my app and camera to pick up the correct colours. It's either too washed out, too dark, or the tint is wrong, so you'll have to trust me with the colours here. I will get the proper colours shown at the end of the video when I record it with a different camera that I can't use to stream with, but yeah, the colours aren't as greeny yellow as the camera is picking up here. So yeah, apologies for that guys, but trust me, the end result will look brilliant. Okay, so once all the dry brushing is done, I'm now taking some Reikland Flesh Shade and straight from the pot running it just along the bottom of each step, and then as you can see here, rubbing the top portion off with my finger, and this just gives a bit of a gentle gradient going up. Now what I'm doing is, because I'm going backwards and forwards across like this, I'm actually depositing the majority of the wash that's on the bristles at the base, and then as I work my way to the top of the step, I'm just sort of basically spreading the last of it really thin. So you can see here I've put a bit too much, so I'm just rinse the brush, and then I can go back in, pick it up with a damp brush and move it up. So this time I don't need to, not quite as much on there, just drag it across and then bring it up the stone. And what this is going to do, because the Reikland Flesh Shade has that sort of reddish tint to it, it's just going to give a bit of warmth and sort of depth to the stones there. Okay, so now that the steps are done, I'm now taking some Sotek Green and starting to work on the top. So for this, again, the colours aren't quite true to what they would be, but trust me, this is Sotek Green. So what I'm doing is painting up the what I call the rope details around the edge here, as well as the outer ring of the sun and the inner ring that goes around the moon, and I'm assuming that's a little star in the middle. Now I did make a slight mistake that you can just sort of see in the bottom right hand corner just under where my finger is, where I started to paint the wrong part, so obviously it's looking a bit green there. Obviously I end up having to go back in and fix that with the Avalon Sunset and various processes to get it back up to colour. So just be careful of what area you're painting on this, that you don't do that outer square bit. It's just the ring and then the innermost circle plus these rope areas. Obviously being careful not to get this on anything else other than those areas that need to be blue. You don't want to get this down between sort of either side of the rope, and you don't want to get it on the skulls either. Okay, so with the blue done, I'm now taking a small dry brush, it's a little bit rough on the ends, and a mix of the Sotek Green and a little bit of White Scar just to pale it down slightly. And all I'm doing is just stippling this on just to give a bit more of a beaten, worn effect on the blue in the sort of the centre area here. Obviously I don't mind getting it over the yellow of the sun and moon and that, as that's going to be painted anyway. And then you can see with a small brush here, I think this is a size 1 or size 2, I'm just going in and doing a bit of a highlight down the length of each of these rope pieces, and then some edge highlighting of the detail in the middle. Right, so next up I'm taking some Retributor armour and just going around the gold pieces on the top of the pyramid here. So that's each of the skulls, with exception to the one that I have the dirt clump effect on. Obviously that's got dirt over the top of it, so it's not gold. Each of the, I'm assuming they're meteor type symbols in the corners, as well as the sun, the moon and the star. So obviously get a good couple of coats on this and then wait for it to dry before moving on to the next step. Okay, so for the gate at the back of the pyramid here, I'm just taking some Abaddon black and giving this a good couple of coats all over, obviously slightly thinned down so not to clog details, and also making sure that I get the sides of each of these bars, obviously the top, left, right and bottom of all of it, and also the 2 hinges and 3 padlocks down the side. I'll then let this dry and then go over with some iron breaker to give that you know, that iron bar effect. I'll then finish that off with a wash of non-oil, let it dry for about 30 minutes and then go back in and edge highlight with the iron breaker again, just to bring up the edges, make them a little bit more shinier. Okay, so moving back to the top now, I'm just using a knife here to remove the sand and glue that I'd put on the areas that I wanted to keep the Avalon Sunset paint. Now if you were using masking fluid, this is a lot easier to do. You can use your finger and just rub it fairly hard, rough, and it'll just peel that right off. But I found that the PVA and sand method was a little bit more difficult. You could get some of it off, but some of the more stubborn bits I just used the knife here. But it also means that I can use the knife and just scrape up some of the blue where obviously I didn't have PVA, and just, you know, give a few more little rough sort of broken away spots, so smaller areas that PVA might not have worked so well with doing. Obviously with it being quite thick, it's difficult to get very small areas, but with a knife you can put little scratches and things like that in. And obviously the effect that this gives is that over time the paint has worn away and worn back to that sandstone underneath it. And then finally, to finish this piece off, I'm just going to add some rust effect to the gate on the back here. So using some Typhus corrosion and an old brush, I'm just you know, blobbing some areas that I want some rust effect to. Obviously you can do as little or as much of this as you like, and then let it dry for about 3 or 4 minutes. Doesn't take long for this stuff to dry at all. And then come back in with some riser rust and just gently dry brush that over the top, and that will pick up some of that grit that is in the Typhus corrosion. You can maybe get a little bit more of the riser rust on your brush and just sort of blob a few little areas in, and that will give a little bit more of a heavier orange, but generally you want to try and keep it, you know, just to a dry brush and keep a lighter orange tint to it. Right, and there we have it guys, the finished pyramid. So as you saw, nice, quick, easy, nothing overly complicated about this, and the the end result looks pretty damn good, if I must say so myself. Let me know what you think down in the comments. If you do like it, give this video a thumbs up, hit that like button. If you're not yet subscribed, hit that subscribe button. If you are newly subscribed, then a big warm welcome to you, and thank you for subscribing, thanks for your support, and until next time guys, take it easy and keep painting those minis.